Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be talking about affordable home loans in Kenya.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, we've got some great sources for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
We've got notes from a recent housing conference and a really fascinating annual report.
Okay.
So I think our listeners are going to find this one pretty useful.
Hmm.
In Kenya, there's a real push for affordable housing. But what does that actually mean, for people who want to buy a home?
Right.
What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
So let's dive in. One organization that keeps coming up in our sources is KMRC.
KMRC stands for Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. And they're not a bank that you walk into.
Okay.
They actually work behind the scenes with the banks and the Kmrc'S that people are already using.
So they're like the wizards behind the curtain making all the magic happen.
Exactly. They work with institutions like the World Bank to secure funding at favorable rates. And then they pass those savings on to the banks and SACCOs, who then offer lower interest rates and longer repayment periods to, potential homeowners.
Okay, that makes sense, because even a small difference in the interest rate can really add up over time.
Absolutely. And that's where KMRC is really making a difference. Imagine you're earning, let's say, 100,000 shillings a month.
Mm-hmm.
KMRC is really focused on making sure that people in that income bracket can afford a home loan.
So they're being pretty strategic about, who they're trying to help.
Exactly. And their goal is to make sure that mortgage repayments don't exceed 30% of your take-home pay.
Oh, that's a good rule of thumb, that 30% rule.
Right.
But how do they actually make those loans more affordable? Like, do they tell the banks what interest rate to charge?
It's not about controlling the banks. It's about giving them the tools and resources.
Okay.
So they work by providing the banks with funds at favorable rates, enabling them to offer better terms to the borrowers. They also spend time educating these lenders on the benefits of affordable housing and encourage them to, maybe take a chance on some borrowers who might not fit that traditional mold.
Oh, so they're kind of like a matchmaker.
Yeah.
Matching up the lenders with the borrowers.
Exactly.
I like that. But let's be real for a second. Not every bank or SECO is going to be jumping up and down to change their ways.
You're right. And some might hesitate to take on borrowers who they perceive as riskier.
Right.
And that's why KMRC has this risk-sharing facility.
A risk-sharing facility. Okay, what is that? Break that down for me.
Basically, they're saying to the lender, hey, we understand that you're taking a little bit of a risk on this borrower, and we're willing to share that risk.
Oh, so it's like a safety net.
Exactly.
Encouraging them to say yes.
Right. And this leads to some really great stories like Rosemary's.
Oh, yeah, Rosemary's story. Tell us about Rosemary.
Well, Rosemary and her husband, they spent years trying to get a home loan. They were hitting dead ends everywhere they went, and they were about ready to give up. But then they found a SACCO that partnered with KMRC.
Okay, so KMRC didn't actually give them the loan directly.
No, they didn't. They worked through their partner.
Okay, got it.
And with KMRC's backing, they were able to offer Rosemary and her husband a loan with, manageable terms, and they finally built their dream home.
That's awesome. That's what we like to hear, real people achieving their goals. But I'm sure there are a lot of other things that KMRC is doing behind the scenes to make this all happen.
Oh, yeah, definitely. For one, they've been increasing the amount people can borrow so they can get a home that really suits their needs.
Okay, so it's not about those tiny starter homes. It's about getting the space that you need. So how much are we talking here?
Well, they've actually increased the maximum loan amount to 10.5 million shillings.
Wow.
That's huge, especially for growing families.
Yeah, that's great.
They're also working to get SACCOs included in the mortgage interest relief program.
Okay, what is that? Remind me.
Well, it's a program that gives tax breaks to homeowners.
Okay.
And traditionally, it only applied to people who had a mortgage with a bank. But KMRC recognizes the role that SACCOs play in affordable housing, and they've been advocating for their inclusion as well.
So it's about making homeownership more rewarding.
Absolutely. And that's what makes KMRC so important in Kenya's housing market. They're not just providing financing, they're pushing for real systemic change that helps everyone.
Yeah, they're walking the walk.
Exactly. They understand that owning a home is more than just having a roof over your head. It's about building wealth, creating stability, and giving people a brighter future.
Love it.
So speaking of money, I think we should talk about how KMRC is actually funded. You know how their organization works?
Yeah, let's pull back the curtain a bit.
Yeah, let's see where they get all the resources to do all this great work.
All right, I'm all ears. Tell me about those funding sources.
Well, KMRC gets a lot of its funding from institutions you might not know personally. but they're big on the international development scene.
Okay.
We're talking about the World Bank and the African Development Bank.
Ah, okay. The big global players. So not just local Kenyan money.
Exactly. These development banks, they really want to support projects that have a positive impact, on countries like Kenya and affordable housing.
Yeah.
Well, that's really key when it comes to economic and social progress.
I can see why they would see that as a good investment,
Yeah,
but I imagine it's probably not that easy to get those loans.
you're right. Those institutions have pretty strict criteria,
Yeah.
for who they lend to. They want to see a solid plan, responsible management, and most importantly, a project that aligns with, their mission of promoting development.
So you got to have more than a good idea. You got to show you can actually do it.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to how KMRC itself is structured. They've got a board of directors, a real mix of people with hands-on experience in running organizations, and those who are there to provide an independent perspective and really make sure that everything's above board and running smoothly.
So it's like a checks and balances system, making
Yeah.
sure that KMRC is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And to make sure they're representing the needs of all Kenyans, they've got men and women on their board and people from lots of different backgrounds.
That's good. It's one thing to talk about inclusion. It's another to actually live it in your own organization.
Absolutely. And remember, KMRC's primary partners in making these affordable home loans happen are the banks and the SACCOs.
Right. So even though you might not see KMRC's name on the paperwork, they're the ones who are really behind it all.
Exactly. They provide that financial backing, the training.
Yeah.
They even help to develop new programs and technologies that make the process easier and more accessible.
I see. Okay. I'm starting to get the whole picture. But I mean, let's go back to the listener for a second. Like, let's say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, this sounds great, but how do I actually get one of these loans? How does this work?
That's a great question. First thing to remember is that you wouldn't apply to KMRC directly.
Okay.
They work through those partner lenders, like we said, the banks and SACCOs.
Right.
So you'd go to them, inquire about, their affordable home loan options.
So it's like shopping around for a mortgage, but you know that KMRC is kind of behind the scenes making it all more affordable.
That's a great way to put it. And KMRC has done a lot to simplify the process. For instance, they've worked hard to standardize those property valuations.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
But honestly, property valuations sound a little bit boring. Why should I care about that?
It's actually really important. Imagine you found the perfect house. You're so excited, you're ready to apply for a loan. And then the property valuation comes back, and it's way lower than you expected.
Oh, so the house is worth less than you thought it was.
Right. And that can cause a lot of problems. In the past, those property valuations in Kenya, they could be all over the place.
Yeah.
Different valuers might give really different estimates.
Right.
And that created uncertainty for lenders and borrowers.
I imagine that would make lenders pretty nervous, especially if they're already kind of hesitant about affordable housing.
Exactly. So that's where KMRC comes in.
Okay.
They worked with industry experts, came up with standardized valuation guidelines.
Okay.
So now those valuations are more consistent, they're transparent, and it gives everyone involved a lot more confidence in the whole process.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's a more even playing field.
Right.
Everybody knows what to expect.
Exactly. And that helps KMRC achieve another goal of theirs, which is to deepen the mortgage market.
Okay. Deepen the mortgage market. Now, what does that mean?
Well, it means more competition. More banks and SACCOs are offering these home loans.
Okay.
And that competition is good for the borrower.
Right.
Could lead to lower interest rates, more flexible terms, more choices overall.
Right. So just like any market,
Right.
the more players you have, the better it is for the consumer.
Exactly. And KMRC is really helping to create that competitive market,
I see.
which ultimately benefits anyone who's looking to buy a home.
This is really fascinating stuff. It's
Yeah.
amazing all this work that's going on behind the scenes that we just never even think about.
It is. And speaking of things we don't often think about, KMRC is also really into using technology to make these loans even more accessible.
Technology and mortgages. That's not a connection I would have made.
I know it seems surprising, but technology is really changing the way things work in the housing finance world.
Really? Okay.
For example, they've partnered with Habitat for Humanity.
Wait, Habitat for Humanity, the ones who build homes.
Yes.
They have a tech side.
They've helped develop a mobile app,
Wow, okay.
and it's designed to help people navigate that world of mortgages. Sometimes it can be a little confusing.
Especially for first-time buyers.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming. Yeah. So think of it as your guide to affordable homeownership.
Okay, so I can just like pull out my phone and get help.
Exactly. It helps you figure out if you qualify for a loan, what documents you need, even how much you can realistically afford to borrow.
So it's like having a mortgage expert in your pocket.
Yeah, and it goes even further. It has financial literacy tips, educational resources to help you make really smart decisions about homeownership.
That's great.
They really want to set you up for success.
Yeah.
And the app is just one example. They're also exploring online property searches, digital loan applications, and all these other innovations that make the process more efficient and more convenient for everyone.
It's really bringing mortgages into the 21st century.
Right. And they understand that technology can really be a tool for inclusion and empowerment, especially in Kenya where so many people have mobile phones. Having access to these tools on your phone is huge.
It's about meeting people where they are.
Exactly. So all of this brings up a bigger question. What's next for KMRC? What do they see for the future?
Yeah. Where do they go from here?
Well, they're in it for the long haul. They want to be the leader in developing a strong and inclusive housing finance market in Kenya.
Okay, but what does that actually look like?
Imagine a Kenya where owning a home isn't this far-off dream.
Yeah.
It's a real possibility for everyone, for teachers, for nurses, for entrepreneurs, for all those everyday Kenyans.
I like that. That's a good vision.
That's what they're working towards.
But it's not just about giving loans.
No, it's not. It's a huge challenge with a lot of moving parts. KMRC knows they've got to deal with things like rising construction costs, the demand for housing in urban areas, and the need to constantly be innovating.
So some big hurdles. How are they going to do it?
Well, for one, they're working with policymakers to shape those regulations around affordable housing.
Oh, so they're not just working within the system, they're trying to change the system.
Exactly. They're pushing for policies that encourage developers to build more affordable housing. Streamline those regulations that make it hard to get loans and make sure that lending practices are fair and inclusive.
So it's about working from all angles from the grassroots level with those borrowers and lenders and up at the top with the government.
Right. They're not just a financial institution. They're working for positive social change. And they're using their influence to push for the changes that will help make affordable homeownership a reality for all Kenyans.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. That takes a lot of dedication.
It does. And they're also putting resources into research and development,
Okay.
to find new and better ways to deal with these challenges of affordable housing.
Like what? Give me some examples.
They're looking at new ways to finance loans,
Okay.
new technologies to bring down construction costs, even new approaches to community development so that affordable housing projects really fit into existing neighborhoods.
So they're not just looking for that quick fix. They're trying to build solutions that will work for the long term.
Exactly. And that's what makes KMRC so different. They have this long-term vision. They're committed to innovation. And they believe in collaboration. And that's making a huge difference in Kenya's housing market.
This has been really interesting.
Yeah.
It's just amazing all the things KMRC is doing to make this dream of homeownership come true for so many Kenyans.
They're showing how finances can be used to create positive social change. And that's inspiring not just for Kenya, but for the whole world.
All right, so we've been talking about KMRC and the impact they're having on affordable home loans in Kenya. Now let's look at a real-life example and see how this all plays out in a community. We're going to focus on one of KMRC's partner lenders, a SACCO that's really making a difference.
Yeah, this SAC has been around for a while, since 1993, actually. And they've always been focused on financial inclusion, especially for people who might not have easy access to traditional banking services.
So they're really in touch with the community. They understand what people need.
Exactly. And that's what makes them such a good partner for KMRC. They share that passion for making homeownership a reality.
It's a perfect match. So what's been the outcome of this partnership? Have they actually been able to offer more affordable home loans?
Absolutely. Since they teamed up with KMRC, this SACCO has seen a huge increase in the number of home loans they've been able to provide.
Wow, that's fantastic. But I'm always curious about the personal stories. Do you have any examples of how this partnership has actually changed people's lives?
Well, remember Rosemary's story?
Oh, yes, Rosemary.
She and her husband had been trying so hard to get a home loan, and they were about to give up.
Yeah.
Until they found this SACCO.
It's such a great story. It really shows how powerful these partnerships can be.
It really does. With KMRC backing them up, the SACCO was able to give Rosemary and her husband a loan that they could actually manage, and now they're living in their dream home.
I love that story. It reminds us that we're not just talking about numbers and finances here. We're talking about real people and their lives changing for the better.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the individual stories, too. KMRC's support has helped the SACO invest in new technology and training. So now the whole mortgage process is smoother and more efficient for everyone.
So it's like a ripple effect. KMRC's impact spreads out and helps the whole community.
Absolutely. It's about creating a better housing system for everyone, one that's fairer and more sustainable. Now, while it sounds like KMRC is doing great things, there are also some debates and challenges surrounding the program that we should dig into.
I bet. It's rare for any system to be perfect, especially when dealing with something as complex as finance. So what are some of the concerns that have been raised? What are people saying about the potential downsides or areas for improvement?
One of the main points of contention is this difference, what they call the spread, between those ultra-low interest rates KMRC gets from its financiers and what borrowers ultimately end up paying. It raises questions about whether that spread could be narrowed even further to make loans even more accessible.
So even with KMRC working its magic, there's still a markup happening somewhere along the line. It's interesting. I wonder how significant that difference is and what the implications are for borrowers. What's the discussion around reducing the spread?
That's where it gets interesting. Some experts argue that even a small reduction in the spread could have a huge impact, making homes even more affordable in the long run.
I can see why that would be a point of debate.
Yeah.
How do you strike a balance between keeping the system sustainable and making it as accessible as possible? It sounds like KMRC is walking a tightrope, trying to make sure everyone benefits fairly. But are there other concerns beyond the interest rate spread? Are there any worries about potential loopholes or unintended consequences of this program?
That's a great question. And yes, there are concerns. Some worry about the possibility of individuals trying to exploit the system, taking out multiple loans not for their own homes, but as investments to make a profit.
That makes sense. Any system that's designed to help people can also be vulnerable to those who might try to take advantage of it. I'd love to hear more about these concerns. And what kind of safeguards are in place to prevent such exploitation? What's KMRC doing to ensure that the program is used for its intended purpose?
Well, it's still a relatively new program, so there's a lot of learning and refining happening. One of the key requirements KMRC has put in place is that the loans must be used for owner-occupied properties.
So you can't just buy a place and immediately rent it out. You're actually incentivized to live in the home you purchase using a KMRC-backed loan. That's a pretty direct way to address that concern. Are there any other mechanisms in place to prevent exploitation? I'm thinking about verification processes, background checks, anything like that?
That's where those primary mortgage lenders come back into play. KMRC relies heavily on those banks and SACOs to do their due diligence. They're responsible for verifying borrowers' information, making sure they meet the eligibility criteria, and generally ensuring things are above board.
So it sounds like a multi-layered approach to risk management. KMRC sets the framework, and the lenders act as the gatekeepers, ensuring only legitimate applications make it through. But even with all these safeguards, it makes you wonder, how much impact has KMRC actually had so far? Do we have any concrete numbers on how many people have benefited from these loans? I'm talking actual figures, real-world evidence that this system is working.
That's a great question. And the data is out there. KMRC has been very transparent about their performance. As of their latest report, they had refinanced over 3,000 mortgages. That's 3,000 families who potentially wouldn't have had access to affordable home ownership otherwise.
Wow, 3,000. That's not just a drop in the bucket. That's a significant number.
Yeah.
What about the total value of those loans? Are we talking about a substantial injection of capital into the affordable housing market?
We are. The total amount dispersed to those primary mortgage lenders reached 9.6 billion shillings. That's a lot of money flowing into a sector that desperately needs it.
It's incredible to see how these carefully structured financial mechanisms can translate into real-world impact. But let's dig a little deeper into who is benefiting. We talked earlier about KMRC's focus on those earning below a certain income threshold. Are there any other demographic trends emerging from the data? For example, is there equal access for men and women?
There's actually a very positive trend emerging on that front. Over 46% of those refinanced mortgages went to women. It suggests that KMRC is playing a role in promoting gender equality in homeownership.
That's fantastic. It's encouraging to see that women are benefiting significantly from this program. It suggests a real commitment to inclusivity. Now, shifting gears a bit, I want to revisit the idea that KMRC's model could be expanded beyond housing. We touched on this earlier. And I'm still fascinated by the possibilities. What other essential needs could benefit from this approach?
Imagine the possibilities. Healthcare is a prime example. Access to quality healthcare is a major challenge for many Kenyans. And imagine if KMRC could provide low-cost financing to healthcare providers, making their services more affordable for patients. It could be a game changer.
I love that idea. It really gets you thinking about the broader potential of KMRC's model. What other sectors come to mind? I'm thinking about education. Could KMRC's financing model help make quality education more accessible and affordable for students?
Absolutely. Think about the impact of providing students with access to affordable financing for their education. It could open so many doors for young people, allowing them to pursue their dreams without being burdened by debt. The ripple effects would be enormous.
It's an inspiring vision, of course. Adapting the model to these different sectors would come with its own set of challenges. Healthcare and education are complex fields with unique considerations, but the core principles of KMRC, affordability, accessibility, and responsible lending, could be incredibly powerful tools for driving positive change.
Exactly. And you have to give KMRC credit for their willingness to think outside the box. They've proven that innovative financial solutions can be effective in tackling real-world challenges.
They've set a precedent. And who knows, maybe their success will inspire other organizations to follow suit. It could be the start of a new wave of socially responsible financing. That helps make essential services more accessible to everyone. But for now, let's bring our focus back to housing. We've talked a lot about the financial side of things, but what about the actual houses? Where are these affordable homes being built? Are we talking about in specific regions, or is this a nationwide initiative?
KMRC has made it clear that they are committed to providing affordable homes across Kenya. It's not just about focusing on one particular city or region. They want to make an impact nationwide.
So people wouldn't necessarily have to relocate to benefit from the program. They could potentially find affordable housing options right in their own communities. That's great news for those who are rooted in their local areas and don't want to uproot their lives. But I'm still curious about the locations. Are there any specific areas where KMRC is focusing its efforts? Are there any examples of successful affordable housing projects that we can point to?
Remember, KMRC doesn't build the houses themselves. They provide the financing. But they do collaborate with developers to ensure that there's a supply of affordable housing to meet the demand. And there are definitely examples of successful projects springing up across the country.
I'm eager to hear about those success stories. Are there any regions or cities that stand out in terms of the number or quality of affordable housing projects? I'm also curious about the diversity of housing options. Are we talking about primarily apartments, or are there other types of homes available?
It really depends on the specific project and the needs of the community. You'll find a mix of apartments, townhouses, and even single-family homes. KMRC wants to ensure there's a range of options available to cater to different family sizes and lifestyles.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. They're really trying to create diverse and inclusive communities. That's great to hear. Now, I know we've been focusing on the positive aspects of KMRC, but no system is without its challenges. What are some of the hurdles or criticisms that KMRC has faced?
One of the main challenges is ensuring that the supply of affordable homes keeps up with the demand. There's a huge need for affordable housing in Kenya. And even with KMRC's efforts, it can be difficult to build homes fast enough to meet that need.
It's a classic supply and demand issue. If there aren't enough homes available, prices can go up, even for the so-called affordable options. What about the role of the government? How supportive have they been of KMRC's initiatives?
The government has been a key partner in KMRC's success. They've provided financial backing, and they've also implemented policies to support affordable housing development.
So it sounds like a collaborative effort.
Yes.
KMRC, the government, and these primary lenders all working together to make this vision a reality.
Exactly. It's a great example of how different stakeholders can come together to address a critical social issue.
I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding KMRC's unique financing model to exploring the impact it's having on the lives of ordinary Kenyans. And we've also acknowledged the challenges that still lie ahead.
It's been a fascinating discussion.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of KMRC and affordable housing in Kenya. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of this innovative program and the vital role it's playing in shaping a more inclusive and equitable future for the country. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.